Good morning, and welcome to the Mental Breakdown. I'm Dr. Bernie Wilkinson.
I'm Dr. Richard Marshall.
And today we're going to talk about the American Academy of Pediatrics' new guidelines for kids and screen time. Richard?
Good morning. Friday.
It is Friday, and Friday means that we're going to get a chance to talk in a little bit more depth about some of the things that we like to talk about.
That we love to talk about.
We love to talk about. But today specifically, we're going to talk about...
this is something I really want to talk about.
I know. You have been talking about wanting to talk about this for a long time.
You know, when you did a talk this past week.
I did.
Okay, and I do them in schools and organizations and things. And invariably, somebody will ask a question, especially parents, will ask a question about their kids being on media, you know, whether it's phones or social media, and they always ask, everybody wants to know, what should the rules be? What should the restriction be? You know, and so this is a question that comes up over and over and over again as we do our talks around the country.
Right. So earlier this year, about within the last month or so actually, so it's not even earlier this year, it's maybe earlier this month, the American Academy of Pediatrics released their new guidelines, their new perspectives on screen time as it relates to children and adolescents.
Right. A couple of years ago they did this, and it sent a little bit of a shockwave through the parenting community, because they said for children 2 and younger, they shouldn't even watch TV. Right. Or maybe a little bit, but it should be very, very limited. And that sent sort of a shock, because we all, I think most of us who have TVs, they're on and kids are watching them. Right. You know. So, but this sent a little shudder through the parenting community.
Well, and not just even with TV, but when you think about screen time on iPads and iPhones and other devices as well, you see kids as young as 2 years old. I mean, they're swiping through things. They're more,
in grocery carts.
They're better on their iPhone than some adults. Dr. Marshall.
They will remain unnamed. But yes, I am behind the curve.
But so what this author of this particular article that we read, it's the author is Jordan Shapira. One of the things he mentioned was that in the way that he described the original guidelines that the AAP put out there was somewhat technophobic. He said that they almost came across...
He considered it technophobic.
Yeah, it almost came across as, you know, the American Academy of Pediatrics was fearful of what the what technology could do, and that, you know, kids should stay away from it at all costs, and that parents should try to restrict kids from as much of the technology as possible. And
that's what that 2 and younger statement, when they said don't let kids 2 and younger watch any TV, that's what it did. It sent a shudder through the community. You know, and were they technophobic?
Yeah. And it and the new guidelines are very different from that. They have shifted
a little
in some areas, and a little bit more in other areas.
Right.
And so we thought today we would kind of talk about some of that a little bit, some of their guidelines, because again, as you said, it's something that parents ask about very often. Right. And so now we have some revised and updated guidelines that we can go by, that we can refer to.
And we are talking about the American Academy of Pediatrics guidelines, and because we have faith in them. And we have faith in them because the American Academy of Pediatrics is vitally concerned, as physicians are vitally concerned in this issue. And they've studied it very carefully. I mean, this is something that they put a lot of time and energy into studying this issue. And we believe that their guidelines are well worth heeding, because they have a vested interest, and they spend time and effort in coming up with reasonable and we think worthwhile guidelines.
Well, and because they're pediatricians, they are, they have dedicated their practice and their study to children and child development, and child so welfare. They should know. If anyone's going to know, they should know.
If anybody's going to, that's right.
If anyone should know, that's not us.
Right.
It should be
It's them.
American Academy of Pediatrics.
Right. I agree. So they are. The short story is they are well worth listening to.
Yeah.
Okay.
So let's
no question about that.
Let's talk about a few of their guidelines.
Okay.
One of the first ones that's mentioned, and this is from that article by Shapira, and I'll put a link
We're gonna
in the
post
show
it.
notes,
right.
Because I had a very difficult time to actually get the actual guidelines
Right.
from the American Academy of Pediatrics.
Right. You get summaries and you get
yeah,
statements, but you don't see the actual.
Right. So I'm looking to get that, and once I get that, I'll have that posted and updated on our site and everything. But one of the first things that's mentioned here is that that the AAP is now saying that media is just another environment.
Right.
So we have inside, we have outside, we have playground, we have school.
We have books.
We have media.
Yes, right. And we have media.
And
media is a place where kids go.
Right. And so what they're saying is that children do what children have always done, and sometimes they do it directly, physically,
right.
and sometimes they do it virtually.
Right.
And that is okay to some extent. I like the idea of this because it's very consistent with what we've talked about before, and this is going to be reemerging or reemerged at different times with some of these other guidelines. But teenagers, for example, are going to interact with other teenagers.
Right.
In the past, they did that face-to-face. Then they did that on the telephones. And now they're doing it through social
right.
media and other forms of technology.
And as parents, we have to understand
mm-hmm.
that this is their medium,
right.
This is their playground, if you will, their environment to communicate with each other. It's not ours, or
mm-hmm.
shouldn't. We didn't grow up with it.
Right.
We're adopting some of it, but our children grew up in this, and so they're going to spend time,
right.
more time there than we are.
Right.
And don't let that alarm you.
Right.
Okay. All right.
It's just going to happen.
Just where they. It's like going to the mall.
Right.
We didn't go to the mall because there weren't malls. But now,
I didn't say
I know what you're thinking.
I didn't say anything.
There were always malls, right?
Yeah.
There was a world without malls.
Wow. What did you?
It's called downtown.
Wow. So the second guideline is, and I really like the second thing that's mentioned, and that is the fact that parenting has not changed.
So that's the one that I like.
Yeah, because we think, okay, so we gotta create this whole new paradigm for parenting and all this. No, just like you wouldn't allow your child to be outside playing all night long, you shouldn't allow your child to be on technology all night long.
I love this one.
Yeah,
I love it because it's just like common sense, and you say, oh yeah, I guess that's true. I wouldn't let my child swim for 8 hours.
Right.
So you don't let them do screen time for 8 hours.
Right.
I wouldn't let my child, do anything for 8 hours.
I wouldn't. Okay, but I wouldn't want my child reading for 8 hours.
Exactly. Right.
I mean, there's nothing either positive activities or negative activities. You don't want anybody doing anything for that long.
And you say, well, why are you picking on 8 hours? Because that's the average amount of time that children spend. Adults spend 11 hours.
Right.
School-age children spend an average of 8 hours on screens.
I was talking to a high school student yesterday who gets home from school at 2:30.
Mm-hmm.
She goes to bed around 10:30.
Okay.
And so what do you do
from
between
2:30 to
10:30? Watch Netflix.
Really?
Yeah. Just show after show after show. So
that's right,
8 hours. 8 hours after having a day at school. 8 hours of screen time.
Screen time. Right.
It's inappropriate for anything.
Because you should be doing other kinds of things during those 8 waking hours.
And her argument, which we hear often, is, well, I didn't have any homework.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
So she has no other obligations.
And no physical activity. She's
Right.
not involved in sports or anything.
Right.
So she doesn't have any after-school activities like band or soccer or tennis or anything.
Yeah, so our role as parents don't change whether we're talking about technology or we're talking about anything else. Our roles are the same. We create structure, we create schedules, we create limitations, and we try to teach kindness and empathy and all those important things, emotional things that we want our kids to have. We still have to do that.
30 or 40 years ago, we were saying to parents, don't use TV as babysitter.
Right.
Don't park your children in front of the TV. There's nothing new about that. Now we're saying don't use video games as babysitter.
Right.
Okay. Parenting hasn't changed.
Right.
I love that one.
And as much as I know that you love that one, the next one is one that I'm sure that you love too.
Oh, I do.
Role modeling is critical. It's really difficult, especially as your kids get a little bit older. It's really difficult for you to tell your kids not to spend so much time on their social media when you are in fact spending so much time on social media.
I knew a person who would get into his minivan with his 3 children, and he would put a 6-pack of beer between his legs, and he would drink beer while they were going on family vacations, while he was driving his family to a family outing. Now,
that wasn't recent.
It was recent. And I thought, how do you then tell your children not to drink and drive?
Right.
When they have been, since they were young children,
right.
They have watched their father drink and drive. How then does he tell them you can't drink and drive?
Right.
Same with this.
Yeah.
Right?
That's you can't tell them not to spend so much time on social media and plugged in FaceTime.
Right.
When that's what you're doing the majority of the time.
If you want to set boundaries, if you want to set limits on how much time your children will spend on screen, you have to lead by example.
Right.
You have to model that behavior, and they have to see you doing that.
Right.
Otherwise, you have you can't occupy the moral high ground on this one.
Right.
If you're spending 11 hours on screen time and they're watching you, they're going to do exactly the same thing. They're going to model your behavior.
Right.
I like the idea of turning off all these devices, TVs and iPads and phones, for some period of time each day. Okay, just shut everything off. That's modeling the kind of behavior that you should be modeling.
Right. Now, another point that the AAP makes is that children learn best from other people.
Right.
And so we should encourage our kids to be interacting with other people, and
with not virtual people but real people.
Well, they're not as. It doesn't seem as though they're as specific there, but a lot of kids spend an inordinate amount of time watching YouTube, which is great. There's lots of cool information and really funny things on YouTube. However, it's one-way communication.
Right.
And so kids need to engage in conversation. They need to engage in the back and forth of interactions. And so there are situations or there are ways in which you can do that through technology.
Right.
But of course, this includes time face-to-face with other people.
Right.
And so you have to, and this kind of will fall in line with some of the other guidelines that they have, but you have to structure playtime. You have to structure time that they interact with other people, including you.
Real interaction.
Right.
Give and take of an okay.
Right.
That's right. And that comes under that first one, the second one about you don't do the same thing all day long. Don't watch Netflix for 8 hours, because you have to have time for interaction. Okay.
Absolutely. And in some ways, technology will help us with this, because let's say that you have a child but you're a parent who has to travel for work. Well, now technology is such that the future is here.
Right.
You can have phone conferences through video, FaceTime and Skype and some of those other devices, where you can actually sit face to face with your child. Granted, it's through a screen, but you can see each other face to face and talk with each other and interact in real time.
Right.
So, technology really helps us in these ways, and we shouldn't, again, sort of squash the idea that technology is beneficial simply because of some of the more negative aspects.
It's not the problem.
Right.
The technology is not the problem. Okay.
Right. Another thing that they mention is the importance of content.
Right.
And they talk about curation, choosing what it is that your child is using on the internet and on apps and things like that. And I think that that one to me is a challenging one, because many times apps will come into being. I don't know, it's like magic of some sort. There's a unicorn somewhere that it just all of a sudden there's new apps that are huge, massive. It's like that. Instagram, for example. All of a sudden, everyone was using Instagram. Mm-hmm. And almost as quickly, everyone switched to Snapchat. And then almost as instantly, somewhat they're changing to something else. So that's amazing how that happens. Mm-hmm. But when we're thinking about some of this stuff, we really need to think about and consider what our kids are using. Because the issue that I have, or the challenge that I have with it, is that as these apps gain in popularity, mm-hmm. their roles change.
The roles.
Snapchat, for example,
right.
when it initially came out,
mm-hmm.
it was something that I was saying, no way, don't
right.
use that, because people, the idea was that you could send a picture to someone and that picture disappears.
Right.
And so people, it was very well known that people were sending inappropriate pictures.
Mm-hmm.
There was another one, Vine, mm-hmm. Where you send
right.
short video clips. That was another area where people were sending really inappropriate things.
Because it would disappear.
Right. Those apps have changed because as they gained in popularity,
right.
They had to create some new guidelines and say, wait a minute, we got a lot of people using this now, so we gotta stop that. And to be honest, all a kid has to do is click, yeah, I'm over 18.
Mm-hmm. That's right.
There's no real verification or anything, and it covers the producers of the app, of course, but it doesn't change the fact that kids may be exposed to some things that they shouldn't be. But as these apps evolve
mm-hmm.
and gain in popularity, they do change. So whereas before I was saying no way to Snapchat, almost everybody's using Snapchat now.
So it's okay?
A lot of people, yeah, because they have changed a lot of their...
but it's still a 30-second disappear.
It is. To some extent, but now people know that there are ways to save it.
You can take a picture of it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And
so
keep it.
So they've sort of changed some of their things.
Right.
From what I understand, I don't have Snapchat, but from what I understand, now they have monitors. So if people are sending inappropriate things, they're addressing those.
But
things.
as one writer put it, if you want a picture to disappear in 30 seconds, maybe you shouldn't be sending it.
Right. Yeah. Exactly.
So think about that too.
Yeah.
That's why to me Snapchat there's no reason to have Snapchat.
Yeah.
Because if
you tell stories with it.
If you want it to disappear in 30 seconds, I'm guessing that you shouldn't have it up there at all. So be careful with Snapchat.
Well, and the other part of this guideline that they're talking about is curation as it relates to a lot of parents will try mm-hmm. to get apps and computer programs and other programs that are educational. And it makes a great point that more than 80,000 apps are
right.
labeled as educational, very few, if any, of which have any research validation to them at all.
Right.
And so you need to make sure that these apps and these different programs that you're using require of your child things that are truly academic and
right.
truly educational.
Right.
Words with Friends is really fun, but I wouldn't call it educational. It's a puzzle type game, but it's not necessarily educational.
Right.
And they mentioned commonsensemedia.org as a great place to go to look mm-hmm. at, because they do evaluations and they review a lot of programs to let you know if they're educational or not. So so that's great. Another thing that they talk about is what he calls here co-engagement.
Right.
And so family participation. And I love this one because the idea of playing some of these games and engaging in some of these technologies with your kids.
Is
great. That's right. A great idea.
Mm-hmm. That's playing with your kids.
Right.
Take advantage of this technology to interact with your children.
Right, because mm-hmm. we used to go outside and throw the ball and do mm-hmm. some of those things outside, which we should still be doing as well.
Right, you can do all that.
But when it's raining, instead of dad coming inside and watching TV and the kid going off to the room, get in there and play some Xbox Live with your kids.
Yeah, what you want to avoid is that each family member is in his or her little island, and there's no communication among. No, there are things that are wonderfully interactive mm-hmm. that you can do with your family.
Absolutely.
I love the fact that my daughter and I can communicate during the day mm-hmm. while she's at school. And we have this little exchange every day.
Yeah, there's times when I walk by your office and I hear you talking, mm-hmm. and I hear your daughter, and I'm like, when did she come in? And I peek in your office, and there you are on FaceTime with your daughter that's up in college.
Right.
It's like, good grief, trying to use technology in a productive way. How dare you?
That's right. I'm learning. I'm up to FaceTime. That gives you some idea of how tech savvy I am.
Mm-hmm.
FaceTime.
I'm not saying anything.
Okay.
So another guy.
I gotta learn Skype. I have to learn how to do that. My brother lives a part of the year in Germany, and he Skypes. It's a way that he and I can keep up with each other. Absolutely. I learned that he had a little goatee and new glasses, and I wouldn't have known that if he had just written a letter.
I'm not gonna. Your brother has a goatee now?
Yeah, it's a little Freudian goatee.
Mike?
It looks cute. Mm-hmm. It looks nice. He's a musician.
Well, he's a musician, so he's allowed to have that. So,
right.
Another guideline, and this goes along with parents still have the same responsibilities, and that is setting limits.
Right.
It goes right along with what we were talking about before, that you can't just let them do it all the time.
Right.
You have to create some boundaries.
And those limits are age dependent.
Absolutely.
Okay? I don't know whether you're going to get into this or not, but the Academy has come out with age-appropriate guidelines.
Yeah.
So, for example, the first one is birth to 18 months. And from birth to 18 months, the Academy says there should be no screen time. You shouldn't expose a child younger than 18 months to screens because of the nature, the visual and auditory nature. It's too much stimulation for many children. And one of the points they make in the article is that if a mother is nursing or feeding a youngster younger than 18 months, that's a special time for bonding and attachment to occur during these feeding times. And if the mother is watching TV and the sound is on, it distracts the child. It interferes with that infant-mother interaction, which should be a bonding experience. If the mother is on an iPad or watching a movie on an iPad, and the screen is changing and the lights are changing and they're flashing, that's all stimulating a baby when this should be a calming experience for the child.
Right.
So the Academy is saying, just don't expose birth to 18 months. Don't expose them to these screens at all.
Right.
That's probably really good advice.
It is, and what they. One of the things I like that they do is, while that is the general recommendation, I think that they also recognize that it's probably not as likely to happen, because of the way that the world and all that we live in. And so they talk about, if you do, if your little one is going to be in front of a screen, you should be in front of the screen with them, and B, use it as an opportunity to have a conversation to talk about what you're seeing. So if you're sitting there with your 2-year-old and you're watching Peppa Pig, you should talk to your kid about what's happening with Peppa Pig and what's what do you think is going to happen next, and why do you think she would do that, and those kinds of things. So you have that interaction, and it becomes a conversation and something that is potentially educational and informative, or at least developmentally stimulating for them.
Right. That's
Instead of just plopping them in front of the TV in a beanbag and leaving them while you do something else.
But I think this whole bonding it goes back to point one, is that parenting hasn't changed.
Right.
When you're feeding an infant, that's a very special time.
Right.
It doesn't last that long.
Right.
And you're not going to be doing it for very, very many months. And it's a very special time. It's an opportunity. It's not a good time to multitask.
Right.
Don't put your headphones in and be having phone conversations with others. You should be bonding with the child at that point.
Absolutely.
That's what the child needs.
Right. And that's exactly right. When you're doing those activities, those are the activities you should be doing.
Right.
If there's other times where they're in front of the screen or something, then you need to be there with them and managing it with them.
And so you see these themes running through this.
Yeah.
Be careful how you use it.
Another great guideline, and this is a little bit evocative, and that is, it's okay for your teen to be online. Wow. Because a lot of parents are extremely anxious about that. They are it's almost phobic that some parents have as it relates to the idea of their teenager being online.
Right.
But when we look at the statistics, when we look at any real threat, it really is not any any more greater
Right.
than anywhere else, than even at school or at home or in the neighborhood or in the community.
Right.
So it's okay for your teenager to be online, but it's critical that you teach them how to be safe online.
Mm-hmm.
Now, a lot of high schools are doing the digital citizenship
Right.
types of things where you are learning, okay, is it appropriate to give somebody your address? Is it appropriate to put your phone number out there and those kinds of things? But so we want to make sure that they're safe and they understand that kind of those kinds of limitations and warnings. But again, by and large, let them explore.
They have to be able to explore it.
They're going to look up inappropriate things.
Right.
I'm just going to go ahead and say that. I remember my son looked up.
They all do.
He thankfully he didn't spell it right, and so he got some very strange things. And I said, "Buddy, what were you trying to look up there?" And he told me, and I said, "Okay, well."
This is how you spell it.
It wasn't spell. You didn't spell it right. When you are old enough to be able to spell that
for you.
right, then you can look. That's no.
No, they're going to go on. It's just a fact of their lives.
Right.
They're going to go on. They're going to go places they shouldn't go.
Yeah.
Okay. But you have to do is keep them safe.
Right.
Yeah.
Because and again, if we think back to our childhood, I remember being about my son's age
Right.
when he was first, doing a Google search.
Mm-hmm.
He did a Google search for boobs. That was the word. And he looked up bobs. And it just didn't work out. But I remember being about his same age when I found out about, this other older kid in the neighborhood had some magazines
Right.
that we probably shouldn't be looking at that he had hidden somewhere in the neighborhood. And
Right.
a lot of other kids were going to, Mom, I didn't go look at them. I promise. I didn't. I promise I didn't. But again, we were exposed to the same things, but just in a different way.
A different medium,
Yeah.
same exposure.
And so, again, the importance is teaching them why we don't look at that stuff, why we don't search for those things. And if you're curious or you're interested or you want to know more about those things, come over here and we'll talk about it.
That's right, because there are sites that they can go to where we might not want them to go to the site, but there's no danger there.
Mm-hmm.
There are other sites where there is danger lurking, and that's
Right.
what we have to do, is that we have to teach the difference.
Right.
There's
Right.
nothing wrong with driving, but there is something wrong with driving and drinking.
Right.
Okay?
Right.
It's not the driving, it's not the medium.
Right, exactly. And using that same thing, it's okay, it's appropriate to drive. It's not appropriate to drive when you're 12.
Right.
And so, there are some of these things that's going to be perfectly natural for them to be interested in. We just have to make sure that it's developmentally appropriate and that they are prepared and explore those things in appropriate ways. And I talked about this a little bit in the workshop that I did earlier this week. This is what makes parenting hard, because you have to constantly look for opportunities to educate.
Right.
So often we look for opportunities to punish and no, just stay away from that. No, never look at that again. When my son did that internet search, when he was 8 or 9 years old or whatever it was, I could have very easily gone on and said, okay, that's it. No more Google for you. You're not going to be on the computer anymore.
No.
But then I think about all of the opportunities that he would have missed out on after that.
Right.
Not just that, but then the energy that it would require from me to police that.
To be monitoring it all
Yeah.
the time. And that whole monitoring thing.
Yeah. But so now he and I had that conversation when he was 8 or 9 years old. He knows that it's inappropriate, and that if he wants to, that if he's interested or wants to know something about that, he
Right.
can come and talk to me. Now, anytime I go on and I look at his history, I can tell that nothing's been deleted, but he doesn't look up that stuff.
Right.
And it's just a matter of education. It's a matter of informing and letting him know. And he said, "Oh, I didn't know." At 8 years old, he said, "I didn't know that I shouldn't look that up." And so, and now you know.
Right.
G.I. Joe.
G.I. Joe. No,
G.I. Joe
no.
said, "Now you know. Knowing is half the battle." One of the there's two final guidelines here that they talk about, and one of them is creating tech-free zones.
Right.
I think that's awesome.
Right.
I
That's
think
right.
it's an awesome idea to have places that you go deliberately and routinely that are tech-free zones. You just don't have, we don't take our cell phones with us. If we go out to eat, we leave our cell phones at home. Or at least in the car. We don't, probably in the car is more appropriate because people are going to not leave them at home. Right. So leaving your phones in the car, going and doing some of these things, going to the park or whatever, but leaving the technology away so that you can have these tech-free times.
This is another one of those TV analogies, because in the old days, before all this happened, we would watch TV, but when you left the house, the TV didn't come with you.
Right.
Okay, it stayed at home, and so when you got in the car, you were almost forced to interact with each other. Well, now you can bring that with you because they're portable, they're mobile devices. So now you bring, in a sense, you're bringing the TV. Everybody's bringing the TV with them, and so it creates. So now what you have to do is you have to sort of artificially create that same thing. That's a tech-free zone. Because when you're here, the dinner table could be a tech-free zone.
Right.
Okay. And different, we're going to go to the beach, so we're going to leave our phones in the car while we're at the beach, so that we could be with each other.
Yeah.
So I love that idea about tech-free zones.
That's really important. And then the final one listed here is that, of course, kids are going to be kids.
Right.
So they're going to make mistakes. My sons that I was just talking about a moment ago. It's going to happen.
They all.
Whether it's technology or it's going into the next neighborhood when they're outside they're not supposed to, or they're come in late when they're supposed to come in by the time the street lights come on. Right. Kids are going to make mistakes. They're going to fall short. They're going to do something that we don't want them to do.
Because that's not the only place where they're making mistakes.
Right.
I mean, kids by definition they're children and they're making mistakes. It's our job to keep up with those mistakes and help them out. Yeah. So we, again, you educate them, you inform them. If they make mistakes of posting pictures that they shouldn't be posting, if they're sending out or saying things online that they shouldn't be saying, you provide guidance, you provide the information just as you would anytime. You wouldn't want your kid at school giving out their home address and stuff to people that they don't know. You don't walk down the street and give your address to people you don't know.
Right.
No.
Yeah. So
I just lose my mind over this stuff. So is it? No, never mind. Go ahead.
You see that? That's what I work with every day, folks. So kids will be kids.
And
parents will be parents. Okay.
Isn't it safe to say that every kid with a smartphone has made some mistakes?
Yeah.
I mean, I think every kid they're going to go places they shouldn't go. They're going to do things they shouldn't do. They're going to experiment with these different things, just like we experimented with TV and with magazines and with everything. Every kid with a smartphone is probably going to do some things that we don't want them to do. Right. It just comes with the territory.
Right.
But don't panic.
Yeah.
You needn't panic. You needn't take it away. You needn't scare them. You do need to keep them safe. Right. I think the issue here is safety and time waster. That the whole idea of you don't do it for 8 hours a day.
Right. Yeah.
Okay?
Yeah.
Keep them safe, and you don't do it for 8 hours a day.
Right. So
I like this topic.
So again, they're the guidelines that the AAP provide us now, I think, are much more modern.
Reasonable.
They're much more research based. They're they're just much more realistic.
They put time and effort into this. I think it's a very thoughtful approach. I think they've done a real good service.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
So if you want to, you can see in the show notes. It's a article by. It's actually in Forbes at Forbes.com by Jordan Shapira, which is it's just a very nice article. There's a couple of others that I'll list as well in the show notes that we didn't mention here specifically, but some good ones. And then those will give you links to the American Academy of Pediatrics, so you can explore there a little bit more as well. So, all right. If you have questions about any of it, send us a message. Let us know.
Yeah, let us know what your experiences are with media.
We'll be happy to talk more about it because, as we've said before, we have. This is a battle we won't lose. I mean, we won't win. We have already lost.
I was going to say, we've already lost.
We've already lost the battle of technology. It is pervasive. It's unavoidable now.
Right.
And so we might as well figure out how to live within that world because we don't have a choice.
Right. That's right.
All right. Well, that's it for today. That's it for this week. So we hope you guys have a great weekend. We will be back next week to talk a little bit more about some things. We're hoping to start recording a little bit of our some seminars this weekend, and we'll be posting those on the YouTube.
YouTube.
I like putting an article in front of it. The YouTube.
The YouTube?
Yeah, I don't know. It's just funny. So we will be back, and we will be talking about those things, and just follow us on YouTube to see all of those new additions. All right?
Looking forward.
So until next week, I'm Dr. Bernie Wilkinson.
I'm Dr. Richard Marshall.
Have a great one, and don't forget to be afraid.